Welcome everyone who's just tuning in. We'll start in a few minutes, so bear with us. And Kelly, I just wanted you to know I do have the recording running now, and everyone else, this is being recorded, including what you type in the chat.
Great.
Kelly, I see someone was asking about where all the chocolates are. Did you bring the chocolates?
I'm just saying we should have let people know it's BYOC. Bring your own chocolate.
I always have some handy here, but okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Mark Lefebvre, and I am a Project Wild Manager with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And my co-pilot today is Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Reynolds. I am also Project Wild Program Manager with the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and I am in Houston, Texas.
And I am in Austin, Texas. So welcome. When I have the privilege to talk to Project Wild facilitators, I always like to start by explaining that you are all one step closer to the end goal with Project Wild, and it really is an honor. Typically, Kelly and I are talking directly to Project Wild coordinators, and as much as we love them, it's you all that are out in the field and training other educators and making environmental education possible in schools and non-formal settings. So thank you all. It really is an honor to get to talk to you. All right. So today's webinar is being recorded. The recording, fingers crossed, is working. It's running. So this webinar will be available later for you to review and for others to review. In addition to the video, my understanding is that all of the chat through texting will also be captured, as well as audio. All right, and I am muting people. Otherwise, there's a lot of feedback with this many people. We do encourage you to type in questions, comments, chat with each other through the group chat box, and Kelly is going to help in monitoring that. And Kelly, you might want to mute yourself when you're typing because, like me, you have a loud keyboard. Okay, so the goal of the Meet the New Wild Guide provides Project Wild facilitators with an orientation to the new, updated, and changed content in the 4th edition of Project Wild K-12 Curriculum and Activity Guide that you should see pictured on your screen. This orientation for many of you will be a first step to better preparing you to incorporate the new content into your Project Wild Educator Professional Development Training. This webinar will be helpful to those also who are less familiar with Project Wild. We have some folks that are new facilitators and a few that have not yet been certified as facilitators. So the target audience is Project Wild facilitators who are well acquainted, who are becoming acquainted, and who have yet to be acquainted at all. We're trying to cover it for everybody here. The focus of today's presentation will be on changes, new content in the new edition of the Project Wild Guide. And this information is intended to supplement but not replace training that you may receive from within your own state or your regional Project Wild network. And for information about how the Project Wild is being used in your state, we encourage you to contact your Project Wild coordinator. And we may have a few Project Wild coordinators joining us on this call. Again, the webinar is being recorded. In the registration process for this webinar, we asked you some questions, and I want to review 3 of those items. One was, hold on, there we go. One of those was, what state you live in? We also asked, how long have you been a Project Wild facilitator? And 3, whether or not you have received a copy of the 4th edition, that is the updated version of the Project Wild Guide. And so here's some of those answers. Okay, this slide gives you an idea of, and Kelly, if you can let me know, are you seeing the pie graph here on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So you can see there's quite a range in how long people have been a facilitator. We have most people more than 5 years, but there's that 1 year or less. I think I jumped ahead a slide, so I'm going to back up. Here we go. So this is where you all are from. We have people from about 25, maybe 26 states. I think others actually in another country in Europe. But gosh, a great representation from Texas, Florida, Ohio, Missouri, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois. In a lot of states, we have a few key facilitators who are tuning in. So thanks again, everyone, and it looks like a wide coverage from across the country. These folks are staff members, not all the staff, but staff at the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. And you may have heard, and maybe not, but Project Wild recently changed homes. As of March 2017, Project Wild is now a program of the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. Okay, so I wanted to give you some quick answers for what's new about Project Wild. And Kelly, I want to make sure I'm seeing what you are. Do you see the screen displayed, the answers for what's new on your screen? AD's the answers? Okay, all right. So, so I wanted to also note that you'll hear me describe the Project Wild Guide as the updated edition, the 4th edition, the terrestrial guide, the 2018 edition. These all mean the same thing. We're talking about the Project Wild Guide that was updated and published in 2000. Well, we published it in 2018. The updating process took over 3 years. And we commonly refer to it as the 4th edition. It's the 4th major update of the Project Wild Guide. But you'll hear it used in different ways. The title is still Project Wild K-12 Curriculum and Activity Guide. And if you're new to Project Wild by chance, you may hear folks say Project Wild Terrestrial or the Terrestrial Wild Guide, and that's simply to distinguish in an informal way the Project Wild Terrestrial Guide from Aquatic Wild. The 4th edition of Project Wild Terrestrial includes expanded and updated educational methodology, and environmental topics. In this slide and the next, I've listed 8 main points about the new content. And as I read through these, you may want to jot down or type in any comments or questions about these items. First, we have 6 new activities. 6 activities with a focus on the ecology and conservation of bees, bats, reptiles, monarch butterflies, as well as stewardship activities relating to changing phenologies and the reduction of light pollution. Second, a greater diversity of topics involving non-native species, climate literacy, wildlife diseases, human energy use, agriculture, sustainable systems, and geospatial technology. The third main area of updates is a greater diversity of species represented. And this kind of connects to the first point with the new activities especially. So in the 4th edition, a wide range, including of course mammals, but insects, more on herps, birds, pollinators, game and non-game species. And then 4th, we have 16 field investigations in Project Wild. Most of these are from updated activities in which students explore their local outdoor environments. 4 of these field investigations are now what we call expanded field investigations that provide greater depth for educators and their K through 12 students in learning the process of conducting investigations. And moving on here, number 5, new educator resources. Resources that provide additional background on key topics such as climate change, education, the North American model for wildlife conservation, updated background text for every activity, planning guides, guidelines for implementing field investigations, and updated planning and reference documents. Number 6, and we have 8 total, we're on 6. The number 6 area of general updates is that we have more outdoor components. Every activity now has at least one outdoor component, something that helps educators get kids outside. Number 7, every activity now has an In Step with STEM extension. And if you're familiar with Aquatic Wild, you'll remember that that was part of the update that we did in 2013. We have In Step with STEM, and number 8 on the list, Wild Work. Wild Work are career and occupation extensions provided with each activity. And like In Step with STEM, they often link to online resources, including videos, occupation or career profiles, projects. So every activity now has these 2 additional extensions, specialized extensions, In Step with STEM and Wild Work, and we'll talk more about those in a bit. Okay. I mentioned this earlier, I just wanted to make sure I'm clear on the titles. These are all titles meaning more or less the same thing. We have Project Wild K-12 Curriculum and Activity Guide, which is the title that we like to use, for example, when we're putting together promotional materials to describe a Project Wild educator professional development training or workshop. Sometimes we call this Terrestrial Wild, the 4th edition, the updated Wild Guide, the expanded edition, and you may have also heard Next Generation Wild. And that we started using when we were talking about the bigger project of updating both Aquatic Wild as well as the Terrestrial Guide. Moving on. Okay, so I wanted to start off with this page and give you a note about some of these images you'll see. Here's a page, a whole lot of text. There's no way you can read this during this webinar. This is here to help you get a visual reference for much of the written content I'll be showing you images of several pages from Project Wild Guide, and the images are intended only as a general visual reference in most cases, and not as content you would want to try to read during the presentation. If you are taking notes, I recommend writing page numbers of these pages so you can then go back and view them when you have the new 4th edition of Project Wild. And some of you already have that, and you might want to be flipping through those pages or putting it in your sticky notes. But again, these are visual references. So, you know, what the page looks like, the main titles, but don't try to read them all. A number of the slides you'll see today have this tan background, and this is a color code. Each slide with this tan background is a reminder that we're looking at pages that are either in the introductory pages, that is the front section of the guide, or the back of the guide, that is the appendices. And these materials serve as additional resources for either conducting Project Wild activities or other types of background and reference information to help you implement Project Wild. So anytime you see the tan background, we're talking front section or back section of the guide. In this example, this is what's new for Project Wild, and I wanted to jump in here because this is an excellent quick overview, 2-page spread of what is new about Project Wild that you can steer people towards in Project Wild educator training. It's a quick overview of a lot of the new content. Okay, so here's a graph to help you better understand the process of updating the content. In the 4th edition, the updated edition, we have 81 activities. That's actually fewer activities than we used to have, but more updated content. Of those activities, 10 look a whole lot like they did in the 3rd edition. They had fewer changes. There's another 50 that we went a bit deeper into and changed even more. And there's 15 activities that were the result of combining activities together, where we took either 2 activities or 3 activities and made them into one. Sometimes those combinations, you'll see that an activity that was combined into one, it may show up as only an extension, or it may show up as the main idea, the main purpose or objectives of the activity. And then we have 6 new activities. Okay. I want to make sure I covered everything I wanted to here, so bear with me just a second. Okay, I'm good. All right, moving on. This, and right now I'm looking at, it's titled A Key to Activities in Project Wild K through 12 Curriculum and Activity Guide, 4th edition. Kelly, give me a thumbs up if that's what you're looking at. Okay, all right. And by the way, this page will be available to you and to educators, but we put it on the educator resources page on the website because we figure many of you will want to use it in your workshops. So in the blue, these are those 10 activities that are referred to that we sometimes call the keep as is, although really every activity had updates. These had fewer. The green refers to the activities that had more changes. And in the orange, those are the combined activities. And this is a great reference to see which activities were combined together. So in the first row, I'm going to try out the laser pointer here. Okay. Oh, yeah. All right. So in the first, we have classroom carrying capacity and the activity carrying capacity and the activity too close for comfort put together in one activity. That's a big task to undertake, and we didn't try to put all of the objectives, all of the grade levels, everything we're trying to do with those 3 activities into one. That would not make sense. Instead, we put what we thought were the parts that people wanted the most, were using the most, and we felt that were the most important. And if if one of those activities is no longer there and you miss it, look closely at the extensions. And you'll find suggestions, for example, for working with different grade levels or how to bring in related ideas. And oftentimes those other objectives show up there. And then in the pink column, these are the activities no longer in print. And I hear a collective sigh because all of us have at least one, if not more, favorites on that list, myself included. You know, there are many gems, and the main reason some of those are no longer in print is because they're activities that typically did not get used as much. You know, Arctic survival, fascinating activity. Move over rover, one of my favorites. You know, it's not for everyone. Mm-hmm. Have those activities gone away completely? No, actually, Project Wild coordinators still have access to those activities. They will have online access, and they will be able to print hard copies and provide those to facilitators. So if you want to include those in your, you may speak with your state coordinator. All right, and then in the final column, the new activities, there's 6 of them. Busy Bees, Busy Blooms, Bat Blitz, Keeping Cool, Technology at Play, Monarch Marathon. I see a change we need to make there. It says Monarch Maze, it's Monarch Marathon, and then the activity Lights Out. All right, hold on. Okay, let's talk about the 6 new activities. Bat Blitz. Let me say some general words about the activities first, and then, if time allows, maybe come back and go into more detail. But the new content in these activities, as I said, often involves greater species diversity. All of Project Wild activities are intended to cover general principles about wildlife, ecology, human and wildlife interactions, conservation actions we can take. And so when we pick a species to cover those principles, it's really a way that can be used to address some ideas, but it's not the only way. And so when I say a greater diversity of species, it's really that we're using more species, more different kinds of species as examples of how these larger principles apply. The basic set of principles in the Project Wild conceptual framework that is now available online, as opposed to, it used to be in the back of the Project Wild guide, those sets of principles are the same, they're still there. And these activities help us cover those more and use examples of a more diverse range of species. I wanted to talk about the grade level designations too on the activities. We're using the same 4 grade level rankings as we used in Aquatic Wild. But it's different than in the 3rd edition of Project Wild Terrestrial. So the 4 grade level categories are lower elementary, upper elementary, middle school, and high school. And this use of the 4 ranking systems instead of 3 is also a new feature in the guide that applies to all activities. So in general, we can say that there are more activities that cover a broader range of grades. There's a lot more for especially high school. Coming back to this page we're looking at of the 6 new activities, you have access to this at projectwild.org, educator resources. And in just a bit, I'll show you that URL. Okay. So now we should be looking at a page titled Guide Resource, Teach Outside. And Kelly, thumbs up if that's what you see. Thanks. Okay. So in this 2-page spread, this is also in Aquatic Wild. This is to further support the movement of getting kids outside and teaching outside. A lot of this content used to be in the back of the guide, and now it's been moved up to the front. It's one example of one of the changes you'll see in the front of the guide. Here's another page, both front and back. On the left side, this is an introductory page, you know, as indicated by the Roman numerals. Let me get that laser pointer back here. Well, sorry, I'm having trouble getting the laser pointer, but well, anyway, on the left side of the page, you can write down the page numbers. I guess that would be Roman numeral 17 to 18. No, 33. It's a long section. So this is a great introduction if you want to go deeper into the field investigations. It would be a great resource if you ever want to do a workshop specifically on field investigations. Additionally, you can use some of the content that's now in the back of the guide that, if you're familiar with aquatic wild, may look familiar. The appendix on inventory methods, and because it has many pages on methods used in the field by biologists for collecting data. Okay, hold on a moment. Sorry, I'm having a mouse issue here and trying to regain control before I can work the controls here. Okay, I think I got it. All right. So what is a Project Wild field investigation? 16 activities in Project Wild and 8 in Aquatic Wild we consider field investigations. These activities involve students in outdoor settings, making observations, and collecting and analyzing data in order to answer a question about a natural process in their local environment. I'm going to do that again. A Project Wild field investigation involves students in outdoor settings making observations and collecting and analyzing data in order to answer questions of processes in their local environment. On the first page of each of the 16 field investigation activities, you'll find the field investigation icon, the butterfly on the clipboard. Okay, and Kelly, I just got a warning notice pop up on my screen about the internet connection being unstable. Is everything looking good from your side?
Yeah, it's looking good.
Good to know. Okay. Technology. Okay. So here again, we're talking when you're doing a Project Wild educator professional development training or a workshop, same thing. I encourage you to point out this field investigation icon, the monarch on the clipboard. Aquatic Wild has a similar icon as well, and we put those on the first page of every field investigation activity to let educators know. This activity means you're taking students outside, observation, collecting data. It's about the local environment, and you're trying to answer some kind of research question. Sometimes those research questions are given by the educator, and sometimes students help develop those research questions, depending on the activity. That brings us into this idea of the expanded field investigation. Okay, and this is a page from the front of the guide that lists all 6 field investigations. And 4 of those have a green check mark and it may be hard to see, so I'm going to try to point it out with the laser pointer again. Eco-enrichers, environmental barometer, insect inspection, previously known as grasshopper gravity, and world travelers. You may recognize these titles. They are now what we call expanded field investigations, where we really changed the procedures to model a an investigation process where the educator guides students through developing a researchable question. And this model is the same model that was developed by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and the Pacific Education Institute some years ago. And a subset of the Project Wild field investigations and aquatic wild field investigations are modeled after that. Okay, so at the bottom of this page, you'll see circled in red is a note about which of those are the expanded field investigations. And this is what it says. Expanded field investigations in this edition of Project Wild K-12 Curriculum and Activity Guide include more in-depth guidelines for involving students in developing investigative questions, procedures, data collection, and analysis. And again, those 4 activities I named earlier. All right. If you'd like to go even deeper into Project Wild field investigations, you've read the activities, you've read the front matter, and that is the introductory pages in the Project Wild guide, and you've read and practiced with the methods described in the appendices of Project Wild, and you want to go even deeper and get even more of a background on this model of the expanded field investigation, we recommend this resource. Field investigations using outdoor environments to foster student learning and scientific practices. And this is where it's available. It's available at the AFWA website. That is the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, AFWA. Fishwildlife.org is our homepage. And then from there, you would click on AFWA Informs at the top. From there, Conservation Education Strategy, to the North American Conservation Education Strategy Toolkit, and then to field investigations. This is a brand new website, by the way, and we're still working on it. We're going to continue to build it. The Project Wild page on there, we're slowly building, so we're transitioning from the old projectwild.org to the new one. You will still be able to use projectwild.org to find us. Right now, you can actually use both. You can use the new Project Wild website as well as the old one. This page is not on the Project Wild website. It's under a different part of AFWA's larger website. Okay. Here's a great guide resource about North American model for wildlife conservation. And so this new feature added to the 4th edition is a 3-page section on the North American model. In addition to historical background about wildlife conservation in North America, this section lists 7 tenets of the model, whether used for the educator to gain more knowledge or to provide directly as information for students to read. This resource pairs well with activities relating to wildlife management practices and consumptive uses of wildlife, such as with the activity Pay to Play, Deer Dilemma, A Picture is Worth 1,000 Words, the activity Turkey Tallies, Wild Bill's Fate, and others deal with consumptive uses of wildlife, such as hunting and fishing. And this North American model text pairs very well with additional background information. Another new feature that you may recognize from Aquatic Wild, or perhaps if you do Flying Wild, is how this guide is organized. We put in this page, it's a great resource for training educators that are new to Project Wild. It gives an overview of how the whole guide is structured. So we put more emphasis using visuals, that is the graphic template, on the 3 main conceptual areas, or areas of general principles that we're trying to cover. Number 1 being ecological knowledge, 2 being social and political knowledge, and 3, sustaining fish and wildlife resources. Each section is divided into topic areas that correspond directly to the Project Wild conceptual framework, again, accessible online at projectwild.org. the activities within each topic are ordered by complexity. So in section 1, the most complex of those activities, typically the higher level activities, are further back in that section. In section 2, the same thing, from usually the lower grade levels to the higher grade levels. Of course, they all overlap, and it's not so easy to always distinguish which are more complex or less complex, but in general, that's how they're ordered. Same with the section, starting with the more basic concepts to the more complex concepts and principles. Okay. Another important guide resource, this is the 2-page spread that gives the educator an overview on how each activity is structured on the page. Okay, so this is like a template of the graphic organization of each activity. And it's good to review in a workshop because once educators do this, they can more easily digest any Project Wild activity or aquatic wild activity. So you're going to see a lot of red lines show up here in a moment. So first, conceptual framework reference that you should now see a red arrow pointing down halfway down the screen. Do you see that, Kelly? Okay, great. So this is on the sidebar of the first page of each activity. And again, this was in the 3rd edition, the 2nd edition, and the original 1st edition of Project Wild. This provides a code made up of Roman numerals and letters that corresponds with one of the many principles from the Project Wild conceptual framework. And I think we all know that most people don't use those codes, but some of us do. Of course, we do at headquarters for Project Wild, and some facilitators do, and certainly folks working in state fish and wildlife agencies, because these principles closely correspond to the conservation education conceptual framework and scope and sequence. A bit more expansive than that document, but there's a lot of good ways to track what you're covering with students using these codes. And to see the full conceptual framework, we go online to projectwild.org. All right. Next up, we have procedures. And the activity format described here applies to 77 of the 81 activities. I mentioned that there were a subset of activities that were expanded field investigations, and they actually have their own special style of procedures. But nearly all the activities, 77 of them, follow the same basic ones. The others, the expanded ones, have these additional ones that are bulleted here and that are circled in red. The 4 expanded field investigations have questions to investigate also. And here you'll see that, the arrow pointing down, a little box that gives the educator some ideas about the kind of questions that might be developed by students, or maybe questions that they can help lead students towards. Questions that are researchable, that students can gather information on, can gather data on to answer research problems, questions about their local environment. They might be descriptive type questions. They might be questions that help us compare 2 different situations or scenarios, or they might be questions that are looking to help find correlation patterns between different times and places in our local environment. All right. And then here, the next arrow up is for assessment. The guidelines provided here help educators assess students' learning. We're titling this section now assessment and not evaluation. We felt that the word assessment better describes what we're doing. We're assessing students' learning. Okay, bear with me just a second. I'm wrestling with my mouse controls again. I'm afraid I might not be able to advance the slide until I get it. Okay, here we go. And then next we have the In Step with STEM and Wild Work. I mentioned those earlier. Every activity has this. And again, in many cases, in most cases, those are connected to additional online resources. Okay. And I think I skipped one, so I'm going to go back to, okay, so you may have noticed an arrow showing up on your screen that connected from Wild Work and In Step with STEM down to this additional resource section. So in addition to the STEM and Wild Work extensions, we also have many new additional resources of online content that fits well with activities. And so when we find those, we're capturing the URLs and posting them online. So educators can now go online, they can look up the activity they're working on, and they can find those web links to these great additional resources. And we're going to try as best we can to keep those updated as new videos and online simulations, new apps are developed. And we're always looking for suggestions. So if ever you want to email us with a suggestion for online content that pairs well with Project Wild activities, please send it our way. All right. Okay.
Mark, one of our participants, Sonia, suggested using the arrow keys to promote the slides. That might be an option.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to try that. Or not. Okay. It may be a delay with this large PowerPoint too, that it's just taking more time for the mouse to register, but I just pushed the arrows several times, and it's possible that in a moment I scroll ahead. So, sorry if that happens. But now I have the mouse back again, so here we go. Okay, grade level. I mentioned earlier the new grade level tiers. Instead of having 3 grade levels, we now have 4. And this is to help us better break up activities and make, in most cases, a better fit for what grade levels they work best for. It's not a perfect system, but it is a system that is quick and easy to use for educators that are used to going through quickly to find content and that need to conserve their time. And so, again, 4 categories: lower elementary, that's K through 2nd grade; upper elementary, 3 through 5th grade; middle school, 6th through 8th grade; and high school, 9th through 12th grade. And again, there's a lot of new content for high school. And if you've always been sad that Project Wild doesn't have a lot for high school, well, we've enhanced that. We've found what content is great for high school, and we've drawn that out more. So now's your chance to recruit high school educators for Project Wild. Another page from the back of the new Project Wild updated edition: using simulations for instructional purposes. Many great Project Wild activities are simulations. I think it's fair to say that most people's favorite Project Wild activities are simulations. These help learners engage through models that, as described with Next Generation Science Standards, are helpful tools for representing systems, ideas, and for developing questions and explanations. It's easy for educators to overlook an important step when implementing activities that model or simulate real-life phenomena. That is, As part of helping learners process their observations and their conclusions, it's important for learners to compare how the simulation is like and unlike what actually happens. So if you don't already visit this page when you facilitate Project Wild professional development trainings, consider doing so as an opportunity to help educators and help students assess the strengths and limitations of those models, of those simulations. Help them assess the degree to which the model is accurate and how well the model explains and predicts what happens in nature. It might be as simple as saying, okay, you know, we've gone through oh deer, we've done a dozen rounds, we've graphed it. Now, how is that like what really happens with deer populations? How is that different? An important step that's often overlooked, and our hope is that this page in the back of the Project Wild Guide will help with that important part of the process. Here's another page back of the guide. This is effective climate change education. Learning about wildlife and actions to conserve wildlife and habitat are really excellent opportunities to incorporate climate change education. And Project Wild's approach to furthering climate literacy and the challenges of climate change is to focus on climate adaptation. That is, how can natural and human systems adjust to climate change in order to moderate harm or take advantage of beneficial opportunities? So again, we invite you to review these pages and incorporate it into your Project Wild implementation. And if all goes well, we're hopeful to conduct a climate change education workshop at the North American Association for Environmental Education 2018 conference. We have our fingers crossed that we'll get in with that presentation. But if any of you are going to be at NAAE in Spokane this fall, visit us, come to our what we hope will be the pre-conference workshop. Here's a new activity. Speaking of climate change, phenology at play. I love this activity for so many reasons. And like a lot of the new content, I would love to take credit for this, but I was just helping putting the pieces together of what so many Project Wild coordinators developed as a team effort. And this is one of the great accomplishments, I think, that they made, and that is an activity about phenology, about learning the impact of climate change on wildlife. And in Phenology at Play, middle and high school students perform skits and then they graph data to understand the effects of climate change on shifting timing in nature cycles, such as when plants bloom, when insects appear in the course of a year, and the timing of bird migration, and how these changing phenologies affect the ecosystem. Here are a few of the student pages, including a data set with descriptions of the phenophases, which are observable stages or phases in the annual life cycle of a plant or animal, as well as a partially completed graph which students are to complete. And this graph gives a quick visual of changing time patterns for 3 independent species. And here's a look at another activity, water mileage. And this is an example of one of several activities that had major updates. You may already be familiar with the activity I'm Thirsty. This is the revised version. So in addition to introducing you or reacquainting you with this activity, the changes that will be marked up on this slide will also give you a better sense of the types of changes that many Project Wild activities went through. New content in this activity includes changes to the following, and that is the title. So we have a new title. We have now a one-liner that helps educators remember what the activity is about, or maybe entice them to learn more what it's about. And as mentioned, we have the new grade level tiers. We have materials, including new student pages with this activity, as with many of the updated activities. We took another look at the activity time for each activity. In many cases, the activities got longer to make them go a bit deeper into some of these principles that we're trying to cover. In a few cases, they actually got shorter. And then we also, again, included whether the setting is primarily indoors or outdoors or both. In this case, it's primarily indoors, but keep in mind now that every Project Wild activity and every aquatic wild activity now has at least one outdoor component. And in most cases, we've reworked the objectives. These are well-articulated learning objectives that are designed to be measurable outcomes. That is, they're objectives written so educators can make observations as to whether students are meeting those objectives. And then we have in the background section, as you'll see on the top right side, I just added in the red words expanded topics, greater diversity of species, for example. In this case, if you can read the small print, the red arrow points to the word gopher tortoise, which is now included as part of this activity. Okay, so we have new concepts, new principles, new issues such as climate change that we're covering. And here's an example. There's mention here in the background of climate change. And then in terms of new concepts, we're connecting also to many of the new terms to know, that is the key words, which we now call terms to know. And it's really many more new terms, and these are the basic concepts in the activity. These are the basic concepts that can be described with a single word or sometimes two words that we've also captured in the glossary. So the glossary in the back of the guide is also much more expanded. Okay, so again, we're talking about water mileage here, and I'm going to brag on a minute because I pioneer the updated version of this, and thank you again, Kelly. So here's a quick overview of changes in the activity water mileage. Terms to know. So in the last bullet here, terms to know can serve as tags for key concepts or terms to define, as I mentioned. And also take a look at the third bullet, the objectives. In addition to new objectives about environmental content, in this case, we have objectives relating to math skills, which is new for Project Wild. In the past, we've had not much content, not many learning objectives specifically targeting math. Updating the activity I'm thirsty and now water mileage involved incorporating math standards into the objectives and procedures. And so here's some of the common core standards for math that connect with this activity. The bullets here, again, summarize changes from the previous slide that we flagged. And we're taking a closer look at this last bullet, wild work here. This will help show how online resources are connected to the activity content, particularly with the In Step with STEM and wild work portions of the activities. So I know I covered a lot of content really fast here. I know you didn't have time to read all these bullets, but the point is that many of the activities had a very extensive change, and in so doing, we redid the background. It's more inclusive of more species. We now have math in some activities. We have new extensions, WildWorks STEM and additional resources, so look for those online. And really every part of the activity was revisited, and in this case, in this activity, changed. Okay, so again, if you follow the links in projectwild.org, you'll find menus that link you to these mini online resources. And here's an example. In this case, the educator goes to projectwild.org to see, okay, what does the activity water mileage, how does that, what kind of wild work extensions will I find if I go online? And this was something we created, but something we found that we added the URL to educators towards. And it's from the magazine of the American Statistical Association. It's a profile of an employee of the National Park Service who is a quantitative ecologist. Okay, so this is a fancy title that leads learner to question, what are we talking about here? Well, let's find out. What are some of these interesting jobs that scientists have in wildlife conservation and wildlife management? But not all of them are as intriguing as what a scientist might be titled. In many cases, they're one of hundreds of occupations that are represented in wildlife management organizations, not just scientists. So we say occupations as well as professions. The online resources listed here are accessible through the Project Wild website. And I know I keep droning on that important point, but we're really excited to help you make these online connections. And note that there are two starting places indicated on this slide. The reason is that Project Wild staff are working on gradually migrating content from projectwild.org over to fishwildlife.org. Okay, so I'm going to back up a moment. So, oh boy, I didn't mean to use the pointer, but what the heck. There it is, projectwild.org, or you can type in the full URL, projectwild.org/educatorresources.htm. Will take you directly there. Oops. And the second one is www.fishwildlife.org. Another way to navigate to that, once you get to fishwildlife.org, you can also type in Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. That'll take you to fishwildlife.org, or AFWA might take you there. There's at least one other organization known as AFWA. But once you get to fishwildlife.org, find AFWA Inspires at the top navigation, and then navigate over or scroll down to Project Wild. When you get there, you will find this document. And this document, the look of this document may change in coming months, or probably not in 2018, but right now it's a long list of listed by activity and listed alphabetically by activity of additional resources, of the In Step with STEM resources, of the wild work resources, that is the online resources. And so in this example, you'll see the red arrow is pointing to that URL of that job profile that we just looked at. In the activity water mileage, again, what used to be known as in this activity, one of the extensions involves students in researching and comparing water needs of local wildlife species with data on water availability. And here's an example of a site educators and students might access for further research from USGS. And of course, this is an external website. It's not part of the AFWA website. So part of our job will be to help keep this updated. And as you find new sources that you want to email to us or find links that may need updating, please let us know. And here's an example of data and images a student might assemble for this purpose. The aerial image here was generated from the website latlong.net, and that's one of many online resources. In this example, the student was researching water flow in bats, and they're focused not on water availability, but in this case, the potential impact of a flooding event on a colony of bats that roost under a bridge in Houston. And if you haven't noticed, Kelly's down there in the bottom of that slide with one of the Project Wild interns that worked in our Houston office. Okay, and another option in water mileage is for students to conduct a water audit for their school. And here's another online resource they can use. And so now we're going to take a quick look at another resource for conducting another kind of school audit, and that is yes, I don't know, I think I skipped a slide there. There we go, a light audit. These pages show you part of the new activity, Lights Out. Students have the option of conducting a school light audit to help reduce light pollution at their school and in their communities, and in turn help conserve wildlife, local wildlife species. I'm going to back up a bit. This is another one of the online resources. This is an example of one that we developed to help with some of the activities that involve really big, overarching, complex systems like agriculture or climate or energy use. This is an example of a hierarchical concept map. You're probably familiar with the idea of concept, capturing basic concepts and connecting them with arrows in a network on a page or on a chalkboard or dry erase board. Sticky notes are a good way to do that. In this case, it's a bit more sophisticated. We're putting the higher level concepts at the top and working with students to connect each of those concepts with arrows, but labeling the arrows to show relationships between the concepts. So we encourage you to go online, especially for the activity, The Power of Planning or Food Footprint. So food footprint about agriculture and impacts on wildlife, and The Power of Planning, human energy use and the impact on wildlife. Students can explore those very large areas of knowledge and map their ideas, add to it over several days, and help them understand interrelations among complex systems. Okay, I mentioned the new activity Lights Out. There's a quick look at it, the first 2 pages anyway. There's some interesting background here. Types of light pollution, sky glow, light trespass, glare, clutter. Join the movement with us on reducing light pollution as a way to help wildlife, among the many other benefits. Okay, next. These are 4 of the first pages of the new activities that I mentioned previously. And an example again of much of the new content. The new activities are not the only new content. The heavily updated activities hold a lot of new content. So we encourage you to continue learning more about what's new. You'll want to read and practice these 6 activities: Phenology at Play, Lights Out, Busy Bee, Busy Blooms, Monarch Marathon, Bat Blitz, and Keeping Cool. And finally, let us know about your thoughts and your experiences with the 4th edition. We would love to receive your feedback. And of course, we encourage you to keep in touch with your State Project Wild coordinator. I know you already are in close touch. So keep that relationship going and check in with us. We'd love to hear from you. My email address is here. Let me know how it goes. Suggestions, feedback, much appreciated. So thank you all very much. We ran out of time. Apologize for that. If you want to stay on with us for a few minutes and maybe we have a time for a few questions. We can take those, but I don't want you, of course, we understand if you have to go too. So Kelly, thanks for multitasking as you do so well. Thank you for fielding questions. Are there any that popped up that come to the surface for you?
There were a couple of questions. Tamala asked about if any of the links for Lights Out offered alternatives to some of our unhelpful human activities with outdoor lighting. And I was just taking a look, and I don't think that any of those links are focused on that. But if anybody knows of any that are particularly useful, or if you come across one, definitely send them our way. You can email Mark or myself, or you can email projectwild@fishwildlife.org, and we can accept it that way. Since this activity resources document is online, and even as we change the format, since it's online, it's always easy to add links and edit things. So just let us know.
And I will say that as part of the activity, one of the student pages diagrams examples of light fixtures that are less helpful and those that are more helpful in reducing light pollution. So that's maybe the obvious one, but we would love to get more.
Yeah, good point. But
Right.
I think, yeah, that is all I got for now. A lot of people just saying thanks for the time. So thanks for leading us through all this, Mark.
All right, great. Thank you all. Okay, and we'll end it there.